for our Christmas episode right now,
Baby, It's Cold Outside is a
it's what
guide to
flirting used
dating.
to look like.
It's what makes the song even more wholesome is that it was written in 1944 by Frank Loesser, who sang it with his wife, Lynn. So like this is something also that like this is demonstrative by the kind of interplay that led a husband and wife to get married. Like this is the kind of behavior that leads to lasting long-term pair bonded relationships.
Very interesting if you contrast it with other songs that are Christmassy, like the two songs that both have the same theme of
The
"I'm a
more
big
modern
slut."
ones. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, and the very next day, you gave it away. And Ariana Grande singing, I don't want to give it all away if you won't be here next year.
But it's important to remember that the enemy isn't women. It's the cultural group that has enforced these norms that have made it impossible to date women.
Would you like to know more?
Did you read that loud enough for me to use it in the recording?
I can read the thing. Their Troublesome Crush by Zan West. In this queer, polyamorous male-female romance novella, two metamors realize they have crushes on each other while planning their shared partner's birthday party together. Ernest, a Jewish autistic demi-romantic queer fat trans man submissive, and Nora, a Jewish disabled queer fat femme cis woman switch, have to contend with an age gap, a desire not to mess up their lovely polyamorous dynamic as metamors, the fact that Ernest has never been attracted to a cis person before, and the reality that they are romantically attracted to each other, all while planning their dominant partner's birthday party and trying to do a really good job.
So it looks like from the cover, the woman is much older than the man, obese, and with a cane. So,
yeah, the cover's, I mean, I would say the cover's well done in that it seems to be fairly accurate. We have the two overweight people dressed in classic, I don't know, progressive style, standing in front of what I believe is a cupcake counter, looking extremely awkward and unattractive.
oh my gosh. Well, here's a Reddit thread that really got me when I read it because it aligns with so much of what we've been talking about on the channel.
Yeah. Oh, the 20-year-old dating one?
My 20-year-old son doesn't date. His friends don't date. My friends' kids don't date. What's going on?
Yeah.
When I was in my late teens and early 20s, life for my friends and me revolved around meeting girls. My son and his friends, who are athletic and outgoing, don't seem to put a lot of emphasis on dating. They play a lot of online video games and have boys outings. Once in a while, one will hook up with a random girl they met on an app. Rarely does one have a girlfriend. This seems to be the norm for my friends' kids too. What's going on?
Well, and then when you go through the responses, there are some recurring themes. A lot of people just say like there's no reason to do it anymore. There's no point. Other people say that it is too expensive and they can't afford to date anymore, or they bemoan the loss of affordable third spaces, basically places that aren't your home or your school or work, where people can hang out. And then a lot of people just talk about like not having game. And one interesting comment that I thought was astute was balkanization of cultural touchstones. And what they meant by that was that like in the past, if you were both into gaming, you played like the same 3 games. If you were into anime, you watched the same 3 anime. Now, even if you are into a specific subgenre, like you aren't necessarily into the same thing. So there are fewer people who share affinity networks really closely. And I question
I'm going
that.
to push back on that one. I think that they are, because I remember when I was in high school, it was all about the bands that that no one else knew about, or the games that you played that no one else played. Like
It's a
this was,
dominance hierarchy thing to show how obscure and advanced
that's how
your
you
interests
win
are.
within a dominance hierarchy that's affiliated with a specific thing. It's typically by showing how extremely affiliated you are with that thing. And so people would front their dominance hierarchy by pushing that. And this, to note, this is not like a isolated phenomenon. We'll put some graphs on the screen here, but the rates of sex that people have been having while they're in high school has been dropping really dramatically over the last.
So many people have worked hard to make happen. I mean, I remember being in high school when they were like, the rates of sex are so high. I mean, mission accomplished.
Yeah, mission accomplished. No one's having sex anymore.
There you go.
Well, I mean, and rates, it's interesting. I think our generation, sometimes they can look at the younger generation and think of them as so sexually free. like, oh, look at all this stuff that's allowed now. Like I would be allowed to have like 10 girlfriends at once and blah, 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 blah. When in reality, no, just nobody's getting anything, right? Like the level when we talk about like dating and sex markets being broken, because it's not just dating markets, it's not just marriage markets, it's also sex markets. It has gotten very hard, I think, for both males and females. And for our Christmas episode right now, one thing that I was really meditating on in regards to this topic is the song Baby It's Cold Outside. Because I've been
My
listening
favorite.
to it recently, and depending on the intonations and tonality used by the singers, like there are ways to sing the song if you really want to make it sound rapey, you can do that. But generally speaking, the song doesn't come off that way at all. It comes off just like normal hitting on a girl from the past.
Right, and it
And
reminds me very much of, like, many traditional dating methods, mechanisms, and
Mhm.
mannerisms. They're designed around plausible deniability, making it more comfortable for people to make advances at partners in a way that, one, it didn't make the other partner feel uncomfortable because they weren't like, I'm going to kiss you right now. I want to have sex with you right now. Instead, it is, oh gosh, I wish you didn't have to go home. So that you could each of you could have plausible deniability. And if one person wasn't into it and clearly made signs of rejection of like, nope, I got to go home now, bye, then both could pretend that there was never an advance made and both could pretend that they're happy to be just friends. And so that kind of interplay is actually not
It's
only
very
like not only
yeah,
socially helpful, but also like protective of people's ability to say no. It's actually like super, it's better than directly asking for consent because you don't have to
exactly.
disappoint someone the same way.
Yeah, because then and it does hurt somebody when you tell them no, like
Yeah.
that hurts somebody. When you drop subtly that you're not interested, that doesn't hurt them as much,
Yep.
and it
Yep.
allows you to stay friends and allow things to not get awkward. There
Yep.
was a reason that relationships worked this way. There was a reason that flirting worked through this system of plausible deniability.
Yep.
And a lot of people could be like, no, she's explicitly saying she wants to go. And it's like, yeah, but she's not going. It's not like she's being held hostage. What they are both telling each other with the words that they're using is, I am interested in you. Yes, in that explicit way, but I need to see you be the one to say, yes, I'm interested in you back.
Yeah.
And what's the humor in the song comes from the fact that neither of them is stepping up and just being like, yeah, I'm actually interested.
Yeah.
And
Like you can hear it's like there's this one line in the song where
gosh, your lips taste delicious.
no. Gosh, your lips look delicious. And then the next thing he says after the female says her part is, "Gosh, your lips taste delicious." So clearly things are progressing.
Gosh, your lips are delicious. Never
They're
They're
already hooking up, and
uh-huh,
that's the humor. They are hooking up while pretending
yeah.
to each
Like, "Well, I
other.
better go home." Well, you
Yeah,
shouldn't.
like,
It's
"I
dangerous out
better
there.
go home. I don't know about this. What are people gonna think if I stay with a guy like you all night?"
have that scar. Gosh, your lips look delicious.
Oh my
Yeah, they're having
gosh,
fun with
what's in
it.
this
It's very
drink? I can't be responsible for my actions anymore.
Well, what makes the song even more wholesome is that it was written in 1944 by Frank Loesser, who sang it with his wife, Lynn. So, like, this is something also that, like, this is demonstrative by the kind of interplay that led a husband and wife to get married. Like, this is the kind of behavior that leads to lasting long-term pair bonded relationships. It's not even like this isn't even sung by like a sour like single person in their 40s or 50s talking about love lost. No, this is about a couple who is happily married,
Mhm.
who goes to parties and has fun together, talking about methodologies that they used when they were courting.
Yeah, and very interesting if you contrast it with other songs that are Christmassy, like the 2 songs that both have the same theme
Oh,
of
the
"I'm a
more
big
modern
slut."
ones. Uh-huh.
So what is it? One is
Hold on.
the
Well, I mean, there's Santa Baby. The more recent version of this is Ariana Grande singing Santa Tell Me. And then Last Christmas, I think it's Wham called Last Christmas. Wham. Yeah. And then the earlier version of this is Last Christmas by Wham. And both of them are like the slutty perpetually single version of bad
Yeah, like
courting methods.
I keep sleeping with a different guy every Christmas. How come this isn't working out for me?
Why is this person not committing to me? Last Christmas I gave you my heart, and the very next day you gave it away. And Ariana Grande singing, I don't want to give it all away if you won't be here next year.
Which is really interesting, and I don't wanna do it again. She
Mhm,
she
again.
says in the song that she has done it before.
Mhm.
I've been down this road before,
So it's not just saying, I hope that this guy is loyal to me.
but I knew you'd stay. I woke up and you wasn't by my side.
And if these people are dumping them the very next day, this is not a long-term
It's just
relationship.
Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day you gave it away.
yeah,
Something like
there's
that.
not very much affection demonstrated in these stories.
Which is interesting, and that it shows that there is much more wholesomeness and
Mhm.
much more affection in the song that is typically seen as being the more like inappropriate of the Christmas songs.
Yeah,
And when they
yeah.
point to lines like "Baby, what's in my drink?" like, or what she's saying, "Hey, what's in this
Say,
drink?
"What's in this drink?"
What's in this drink?"
Say what's in this drink.
So one, in social context of the time period, that was a common way to say,
I'm
um,
feeling kinda tipsy.
I'm feel like my inhibitions are down,
Mhm.
like maybe we should do something. You compare it to something my mom used to say all the
Yeah,
time,
your
which
mom
is like,
used to, like, have, like, 1 glass of wine and be like, "Not gonna lie, I'm a little tipsy," just to, like, show that she was in a celebratory mood, and that's exactly like, this person basically is saying, "I'm down to clown," and that's
yeah,
great.
basically saying I'm down to clean. Now, let's be clear. The accusation here is she's implying that the drink was spiked with alcohol, or that the drink was spiked with
Stronger than
something
she expected, but that's
worse
it.
than alcohol. But
Yeah.
then she wouldn't be saying what she's saying. Like, it is very clear from contextual clues.
I wish I knew how.
Your eyes are like starlight
To break
now.
this spell.
When our society's social rules aren't made up by, and I'm sorry to say this, Simone, I know you're autistic, but autistic idiots who can't catch basic social cues, that they see somebody say that in a song and they go, "Oh, she's being drugged against her will," when really what she's saying is, "I'm down to clown," very obviously. And then they'd be like, "How can you tell the difference?" And it's because she didn't immediately leave. A sane person who thought that their drink had just been spiked
Yeah.
inappropriately is leaving, is going to say, "Hey, what are you doing?" Like,
Yeah.
even if they were like, "Oh, well, she's afraid of the guy in this song and that's why she's not leaving." First of all, that's this weird progressive feminist fever dream. She very clearly has the ability to leave at any point in the song, and that is made clear throughout the song. The fact that she is saying, "Hey, my inhibitions are down," but she's deciding to stay, is saying, "Hey, I'm interested in you."
Mhm.
And just if we go over like the way flirting works, right? She is very explicitly coding for him in the excuses that she is using not to stay, is other people will think negatively of her for what it would look like she had done if she stayed. So
Yeah.
what is the implication of that? The implication is she intends to do those things.
Mhm.
Okay? She is
Mhm.
not vaguely bringing up like, "Oh, people will, think something has gone wrong," or something like that. It's, "People will think we hooked up if I stayed here." That is what flirting looks like. And the
Mhm.
level of autism to hear that and think that this is somebody who's being flirted with against her will is frankly absurd. And I think that this shows, I mean, then a lot of people can say, like, "So what are you saying? Are you saying that we should go back to flirting this way?"
But
Because
not
if
so
I
I would
do,
I'm gonna defend the autists over here. Like,
okay,
if I were to hear this and interpret this like an autist, the insinuation is actually like, there's inclement weather outside and I need to stay here all night, but people will think negative things." That's it. Like, I get zero like autistic hackle raising about like some implication of foul play or coercion from this song.
yeah.
It's just too wholesome.
Yeah, and that's so, but this all comes back to the lowering rates of sex, people not knowing how to date, and people not being able to date in the way that they would have historically dated.
Yeah.
So I think that there's many guys who know, like, this is what courtship is supposed to look like. Another really interesting thing, and when I say supposed to look like, is historically, when people courted this way, I know because I courted this way sometimes with women, women really enjoyed this. Okay. Women really enjoy in dating some level of plausible deniability. It's
Yes.
just in the past, it was hotter for them.
No, it's hotter, it's protective for everyone.
Yeah,
It's
well, it
safer.
was protected for everyone. The problem is that in our current society, plausible deniability is grapes. Okay,
Well, and
that's
plausible deniability for especially for men is risk because plausible deniability at any point retroactively can be turned into criminal action, which is
yeah,
horrible.
yeah, and that's horrifying for men today. And so they do not date in this way. They have to basically explicitly ask a woman, "Hey, are you open to me kissing you?"
But even in
Um,
some places, like in Denmark, it seems that new regulation at play is such that even if you have like literally filmed written consent notarized, it doesn't matter how far it goes, a woman can still retroactively go back and decide, no, I
Which
wasn't okay
is,
with that.
how do you think people are gonna find partners? Like,
Yeah.
literally. And do you think that this is what women really want? Like, you as a woman, would
Of
you have
course
really
not.
wanted me to be that explicit instead of normal flirting, which is, for example, moving out to touch you and seeing if you remove my hand? If you remove my hand, I don't do it again. This is the thing. And this is the problem where people end up going overboard with this sort of stuff. When the
Mm.
person has clearly signaled they're not interested, and yet you keep making moves. And I think that this is one of the problems. Potentially, as society is becoming more autistic, this sort of nuanced dating, because society is becoming more autistic, this sort of
Mm.
nuanced dating actually does lead to actual grapey situations much more often because people
Mm.
don't pick up the no, I'm actually not interested in you social cues. Because if the woman in the song was actually giving the guy cues like, I'm not interested in you, him continuing to go on would have been a very threatening environment for her.
Well, and
Um,
vice versa. In fact, I think there's a version of the song where they keep all the female lyrics, but then the male lyrics are like, "Okay, go," and it just
yeah,
makes her look super creepy. So of course it goes both ways.
yeah.
And I do think that these problems, especially now, the risk does go both ways because you can now have a woman be very aggressive with a man and put him in a position where he feels coerced because he worries that if he doesn't respond to her advances, she will then retroactively frustrated because she's already unethical enough to push his boundaries when she knows he's not okay with moving forward. She's unethical enough to also then make accusations should he not accept her unwanted advances. So I think it can be equally
Mhm.
scary for men in these situations.
But and one thing I want to be clear, which I think is always one of the big problems or things that annoys me about the wider manosphere, is we'll
Mm,
point to an issue like this has happened because of a change in dating culture. And and I talk about how this affects both men and women. And they're like, well, it's
mm.
a change that women wanted. And it's like, no, it's a change that some influential women wanted. I'd say that always the majority of women in society didn't really like that this
Yeah,
change was happening.
I don't even think it's fair to say that women wanted it. I think it's fair to say that power hungry bureaucrats wanted it, that people playing dominance hierarchy games wanted it, people who wanted to impose safetyism culture wanted it. And I don't even think, again, I think it's safetyism culture, but within a dominance hierarchy, just as we were going back to like anime, right? Like people showing that they're bigger fans of anime or indie rock bands by choosing more and more obscure, impossible bands and shows in the same realm of safetyism culture, which had a massive meteoric rise throughout the 90s and especially the early aughts. The best way to show your extra power, your extra commitment to that movement and to wokeism in general was to propose even more stringent classifications and agreements like, oh, we have to have all these terms and now you need to have a written consent. And of course, I'm clearly better and more important in this culture because I'm the one who's willing to take this obscure and extreme measure. So again, this is not a woman thing. This is not a man thing. This is a dominance hierarchy slash bureaucratic tumor thing. Do you,
Yeah,
I mean,
and and then people will be like, yeah, but that movement was more female than male that caused this cultural breakdown. And I'm like, so fucking what? So
yeah.
fucking what? A lot of the women who I am sad that this is hurting today are not these ultra progressive women. I am sad that this is hurting normal girls who are
Well,
out
yeah,
there.
I mean, it's like in like Viking raids in which there was pillaging and brutalization of families in small villages. It's like, oh, well, this is a man problem. Men were doing all of the raiding. And it's like, well, yeah, but also it's like fathers, male children, brothers lost people they loved, had people they loved violated, were themselves killed. Like, I'm sorry, there are victims for every violent, corrupt, hurtful movement out there. Don't pretend that like because some box is ticked among those who are the aggressors means that the aggressors are that box ticked.
So, and what this means is focus on the group that is motivating the action, not the individual, not like some aspect of the individuals, right? So,
Right,
like,
right.
if you're mad about the Viking raids, don't be mad at men, be mad at Vikings. If you're mad about what the ultra progressive wokest, urban monoculture cultists have done, be
Hmm.
mad at them,
Yes.
men, male or female. Don't be mad at women.
Hmm.
There's women out there that are hurt by this just as much as there are men that are hurt by this. And we need to work together to destroy the actual scourge which has led to this and
Hmm.
work together to fight against that scourge, not blame people who may have a lot of sympathies for our cause and what's going on. But this brings us to another point that you were talking about, which is we do still need to recognize that on average, women are more progressive and men are more conservative. And
Yes.
one of the things that has led to a damage in dating culture is people not being willing to cross the aisle in dating anymore.
Right. So Lyman Stone and Brad Wilcox recently wrote a piece on this in The Atlantic where they talked about the growing disparity between men and women in terms of political affiliation, plus the growing number of people who are not willing to date across the aisle. And this is not something that showed up in their article. For some other event, I went over a detailed survey results PDF that showed friendship over the years, and it also showed that friends are less likely to befriend people who have different political affiliations from them, and that people have unfriended people based on their political affiliation. However, this is worse among progressives. So progressives are much more likely to have unfriended someone because they were conservative or just not progressive enough
Which is
than
really interesting because it's
yeah.
actually more dangerous for conservatives to have progressive friends than progressives to have conservative friends.
Why do you say that?
So, for example, if I'm a guy and I'm hitting on a woman who's too progressive, that's
Mhm.
actually a huge risk to me because she can like get me
Oh,
charged with rape or something like that.
right.
Whereas the inverse is less true. Although women could say, "Well, he may not respect my boundaries" or something. These
But
guys, they're just,
this is
yeah.
this is really frustrating though, right? Because like when you and I met, I think you and I were both way more progressive than we are now, which is a very common trajectory, right? Like people grow up and get
Actually,
responsible and
that's not
start.
true.
Really? I thought it was
Yeah, it's
like
a
the thing
common myth.
to
I'm not
start
gonna let
out
you blame the
progressive and
study
they
on
end up
it, but
conservative.
yeah, people don't actually become much more conservative as they age. Your political leaning is heavily genetic and not
Mm.
really, well, not heavily, moderately genetic, and then other than that, it's experiential. But it doesn't seem to turn consistently more conservative as people age. But
Well,
I'll
then
put up
what's
with
interesting
that.
then is I would say that our political leanings genetically, if I had to like come up with like what our genetics seem to reveal about our intuitions, is that we're both extremely classical liberals, like libertarians, like get
Mhm.
off my life, don't mess with my stuff. And but I think was more on the progressive end when we met, and you were more on the conservative end when we met. Like we
Not that
this
conservative. I
moment
mean, I was still I would have been considered progressive back
you
then.
were, yeah, no, you were totally considered progressive, but also like when we were going to get married, remember, like at first I was like, well, of course I'm not going to change my last name. And you're like, what?
Yeah, I was like, no, of course you're changing your last name.
And so, but like, that's the thing is like now I think women would hear you say something like that and be like, well, that's a deal breaker. And it's so
But
stupid.
would you have ever been caught up by this culture so much that you would
Well,
feel that way?
no,
'Cause I feel like
probably not.
you're
But like, also, I don't know. Like, things have gotten so extreme recently. People have gotten so like, there's this collective delusion. I do think that there's some kind of weird social contagion. It's, I mean, it was possible in like the Middle Ages for people to dance themselves to death because some weird social contagion spread in their village, right? I think it's entirely possible for people to who are otherwise perfectly reasonable Like, is he really?
I love this analogy that this is like in the medieval ages when people dance themselves to death, that's what we're seeing among progressives right now. You know, we were talking with this reporter who reached out to us recently. Do you wanna go over like, she just kept bemoaning like, "Well, I need to find a guy who, you know, lives in New York City and is, progressive, and it's very hard
Yeah,
if
and
you
like
have
I'm,
those requirements."
why I won't find, guys who compromise for me. And she showed absolutely zero willingness to compromise for a guy when really, like for me, my process of really falling in love with you was every time you exposed me to something that I hadn't realized, every time that you changed my perspective on something, every time you opened my eyes to something. Like I remember
Mhm.
one day I was like, well, America has like the worst education system. We're so embarrassing. And you're like, actually, like, have you seen what European like education systems are like? And he showed me all this data, and I was like, holy smokes, America's amazing. What? And like, like I feel like people should be even more attracted to people of different. Well, I would say they should be even
But
more
that's
attracted to
because
conservatives.
so I think one thing that's important to note is many progressive women out there are like Simone. They are actually interested in finding out what's true about the world, okay?
Yeah, and I
And they
think
will
many people
be
are progressives
excited,
because they're pro-social and they care.
but that means you have to use actual data-backed arguments, you need to actually go over stuff. Now, there's
Mhm.
another class of women out there who, if you show data that doesn't agree with their tribe's preconceptions, that is an attack.
Yeah.
And those are people who you will just never be happy being with. Just trust me. Like if they're like an ideological tribalist, even if you're progressive, you're probably better off not being with them.
Well, and these people aren't pro-social in the end because they don't care about data that ultimately may help them improve societal outcomes. They care whether or not you have shown to be in their cult.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess what we're saying at the end of all this is uh
Baby, It's Cold Outside is a
it's what
guide to
flirting used to
dating.
look like.
It's yes,
Um
it is how you should flirt if you find someone who's not completely woke and likely to write you up and report you to the police.
well, I think even now I don't think the young generation could easily risk flirting that way.
Oh
Um
boy.
No, so I think it's an intractable problem at this point, but it's important to remember that the enemy isn't women. It's the cultural group that
Mm,
has enforced these norms that have
mm.
made it impossible to date women. And that if you can get through that, if you can get a potentially good partner, it is much harder to date than it was historically. I would not play the trade up game as aggressively as I see some of our followers playing it, where they're like, well, I can do better than the one I have right now. Maybe, maybe. And they're like, well, if I get a lot richer, and it's like, yeah, but then you're older and you're in a dating market where it's potentially even harder. Like, when I say harder, they're like, yeah, but women get more desperate. Like these 30-year-old single women, they're more desperate than the younger ones, and I can get more attractive women. And I'm like, yes, you probably can. But I'd also
Yeah, but
point out,
even those more attractive women now, I think are culturally ruined. I was just poking around
yeah,
on
that's
Reddit
what
last
I
night.
would point out. It's
I
by
was
the time
looking
you're
at
that age.
like, I think maybe Am I the Asshole? I was looking at that subreddit and there
Mhm.
was like 22, no, 19. She was 19. And she was like, am I the asshole for being mad that my 62-year-old husband says he can't care for our twins? Like, so she decided to marry this guy who's incredibly like way older than she is and clearly is a stay-at-home wife and was surprised that her husband, who had just gotten some kind of diagnosis, like I think he needed to get a hip replacement or knee replacement or something like pretty intense, and was like, listen, you're going to need to kind of like pull the weight here. I'm like literally not well enough to raise twins right now. And she's like, well, and there was another one that I read, and I think this was also Am I the Asshole? Or maybe just No Mother-in-Law, which is another subreddit I follow, where someone was talking about her evil mother-in-law and how her mother-in-law was criticizing her for not doing enough cooking and cleaning as a stay-at-home wife. So not even a stay-at-home mother, just a stay. So the woman who has
Mhm.
no job and just stays at home in a very expensive house, who her mother-in-law was by, and she found her husband making and cleaning up after dinner as this wife was lying in bed upstairs because her period cramps were too bad. And then the mother was sort of criticizing for her for like, listen, you're a stay-at-home wife, like why is he making dinner for you and cleaning after working all day? And I'm like reading this and my blood is boiling. Like, this woman is so entitled. Like, part of me is like, yeah, throw up your hands. Women are ruined. Like, I don't know. Like, just like that there could be this like complete lack of understanding of, this is not about women and men. This is not about roles in the household. This is not about like men should be able to do their own laundry and cook. Everyone should be able to take care of themselves. Obviously, this is about reciprocity. This is about, what are you bringing to the table in a social contract?
Yeah.
And people seem to have completely lost the plot there, that there is no like, again, it's that level of entitlement, of just like, well, but of course I deserve everything because I deserve everything, instead of like, you deserve as much as you deserve based on what you bring to the table. If you bring 10 points to the table, you deserve 10 points in return, of equal value.
Well, I am so lucky that I met you, and that I met you young enough that we were able to grow together, and those cultural influences that could have tarnished both of us were able to intertwine as we grow up together. And so, yeah, I just strongly encourage people to not think, I'll be wealthier in the future, I'll be more successful in the future, I'm just going to wait to do better.
Well, but also like, not to wait for a perfect person out of the box, because there is no such thing. You have to grow with someone.
Yeah.
And someone's not going to be perfect for you. You have to make them perfect for you, and you have to become perfect for them. Like, I was just thinking, like, if I woke up someday as like a single man and I had to figure out like what to do, I actually think there's a ton of low-hanging fruit. Like, I would go through like all of the female porn like subreddits and stuff, and sort of see like what women fantasize about, because actually like a ton of it's really wholesome. And then I would just start acting it out, like, just be that like kind listener who makes them feel safe and blah, blah. Like it's not that hard. And it's, now we have more data than ever. Like, I think in the past it was actually really hard for men to understand what women wanted. Like, kind of, you had to go by ads, and ads were like, well, buy this perfume for your wife and she'll love you, or like, get flowers for this girl and she'll be so happy. Whereas now, like, you can literally see the number of upvotes on specific behavioral patterns and then ape them. Like, hello, low-hanging fruit, like crazy. And of course, that doesn't change the fact that like women are crazy entitled and men are crazy entitled and people are lazy and stressed and whatever, and there's no money and there's no desire. But like, there's still so many things you can do, and you have to adapt. You as you are not good enough, period. Not good enough. No one is. I wasn't good enough for you. That's just like super clear. And you changed a lot for me too, to accommodate me, because I'm very neurotic and crazy. So anyway, rant over. Soapbox.
Well, and this is fantastic, and I appreciate that when I met you, I mean, you were good enough in that you always were working to improve yourself, and you always recognized that you could improve yourself still, and that was a desirable thing.
I guess the most desirable thing these days is malleability, isn't it? Well, and infatuation.
Well, yeah, infatuation and interesting. It's being submissive and breedable. Okay.
Yeah.
Here you go, Mommy.
Thanks, buddy. Okay, close it up. So you have the cookies for Santa.
Yep,
And now we need some milk, right?
milk. That's right.
Yeah. Can you get some milk for me?
Now where's the cup? There.
We already have a special cup out.
Simone, can you tell me a bit about these?
Santa.
Well, so Octavian, do you know about the special plate? This was from when Mommy was born, and it says, Merry Christmas 1987. Colonel Sanders may land on your roof tonight with many Christmas delights in the Kentucky tradition.
It was in Japan, right?
Yeah, so in Japan,
You were born in
Colonel
Japan.
Sanders brings toys to the children.
And well, yes, and what about the cup?
Oh,
And
Santa
the cup,
Claus.
look at this is a cup from Daddy's family. It says James M. Collins. That is your great grandfather. Shall we fill it with milk for Santa?
Yeah. Sure. Good idea.
All right. Now let's take it to the Christmas tree. You want to hold the plate?
Yep.
Be very, very careful. 2 hands. Slowly, slowly. Good job.
Mommy, aren't you gonna break?
Yeah, we don't want anything to break. That would be no good, right? Oh no, on the Lord's side. Okay, we'll try this.
It's fine.
All right, now put it right on the table here, right by the Christmas tree. This is a table, buddy. Right here. Perfect. And when Santa comes, he'll have milk and cookies.
Yep. And see, and after I see,
And I'll make nice and strong.
Good